Dear friends, Operator Starsky here, and this is In Time.
Hello. Welcome everyone to Downtime. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who are new, this is kind of our more laid-back program. We talk about any number of things, but definitely there's a couple of things I figured we should bring up. But first and foremost, let me introduce Commander Lance McMillan, who is always here with us on Downtime, and I think that's about it. That should be all I need to introduce, right? There's nobody else here.
Heck,
yes.
there's another person in the room,
Is there?
and he's not even an elephant, so you do have to talk about him.
Okay. And I'd like to introduce In Time's co-host, Isandring, who, as it turns out, is a co-host on the show and was present during our show with Greg Terry. His card was there. He doesn't normally have his camera on because he's just on the road. But a certain host who shall remain nameless, if anybody wants to keep their jobs, a certain host may have forgotten to introduce the co-host.
Jacuz.
Thinking?
I can't imagine who would ever do that.
No, I certainly. No, we run this thing like clockwork. That's why we have all the clocks to remind everybody just how. So we said, let's like downtime, in time. It doesn't matter. We're just never on time. That's the one thing we're not going to do. What actually happened is we ended up right before the show. We were talking with Greg, who was a really good guy. First time we've ever had him on. I've streamed with him a couple of times. He always he seems a little intense, and so you always wonder about people with that kind of intensity. Is he like is that just his style, or is he the real thing? And he's the real thing. I mean, he's there's a reason he's intense. He's out there doing it for real. So and we were talking right before the show, and we said, okay, what we'll do is Andrew and I'll do our little banter, and then we'll introduce you, and then the shield will go up, and we're good to go. And for whatever reason, his shield just vanished, and there was none, and the show started, and he's already up there, and he's just waiting to be introduced. And I'm just like, oh god, he's gonna I don't know what he's gonna do. Is he gonna pick his nose? I don't know what he's gonna do. It's a little unprofessional. He's just waiting. I was just like, okay, so I just have to introduce him right now. And in all the hubbub, I may have forgotten to introduce the co-host. So he and I just get into it, and then I was just like, "Oh, we've got some questions," and I'm texting Isandring. I was like, "Oh, we'll get to your questions later." And he's like, "Well, you guys have a good rapport going. It's halfway through the show, and I don't think anybody actually knows I'm here." Just like, why wouldn't they know? And I had no idea. And Isandring was really good about it. He's like, "Just when you close out, don't even thank me. Don't mention me." I'm just like a fly on the wall. I was like, "Why?" He's like, then afterwards, like, "You do realize you didn't introduce me?" I was just like, "Oh. Well, that was rude."
I'm still charging you for the episode though, because I was there.
You were there. I feel that that's only fair. Yeah. So same charge, but didn't. Anyways, so apologies. $2, Sister Porpoise. Could you explain the 𝐒ₐ𝐬 problem? I have no idea what that is. I'm wondering if either I know that by another name or. So I'm going to look that up right now and see what that is. In the field of epistemology.
My response was a good one.
What was your response?
It's what you tell your dog. Go and get your leash. I'll take you for walkies.
Okay, well, it's epistemology, so understanding the script attributed to American philosopher long-held justified true belief account of knowledge. So it looks like it's American, so it's definitely after my time. Reasoning from false belief precludes knowledge, but get your false belief, and so do not. How to distinguish between? I wonder if that's. I don't know. I'll have to get into it at some point. It's philosophy, which I got my BA in. I'm big into philosophy, but I got my BA like 20 years ago. So anything newer than that, and this looks newer. I'll have to look into that. But thank you very much for your support in the super chat. And you mentioned Hume's problem of induction. I am not going to bore everybody with that right now. Maybe in about 10 or 15 minutes, I'll run everybody through that again, because I love Hume's problem of induction. What can I say? I just love to talk about it. So thank you very much for that.
Socrates just released a new edition of his famous work, so you should read that.
I will read that, so I will make sure that I am completely up to date on. I love weaponizing it. What can I say? But it's a long story, how and why. Well, okay. So before I was doing this, I was doing a lot of anti-theist work. I did debates, stuff like that. And but one of the things that always really ticked me off was atheists or anti-theists who decided that they don't have any beliefs whatsoever, and that they have to go around shoving it in Christians' faces that, there is no God and this and that. It's like, yeah, I am an atheist, but what I object to in religion isn't the belief. It's not the faith. It's the idea that their God somehow empowers them to tell me how I should live my life, who I can marry, who I can have sex with, what I can do in my own free time, yada, yada, yada. And I think all moral agents have to oppose that. But it stops there. And then when atheists are like, no, I think that there is no God, and you have to believe there's no God too, otherwise you have irrational belief. And I'm just sitting there going, you're doing the same thing that they're doing. You're imposing your beliefs on other people. And I object to that. So I always use Hume's problem of induction, like, oh, you have faith. You absolutely have faith. You have to have faith, and here's why. And so I do that. And I've lost a couple of friends over that. What can you do? I guess I'm a schoolhouse bully when it comes to Hume's problem of induction. Dunk on you, $20. This is because 𝐍𝐢𝐜𝐴𝐶𝐸. Спасибо большое. Thank you so much for the super chat. We really appreciate it. I've been seeing you around, and yeah, it's nice. I think Greg Terry and I are going to talk a lot more in the future. I really like him, and I think what he's doing and who he's connected to dovetails very nicely with what we're trying to do on In Time, and trying to get ahead of news as it's happening. But I think the first part of that is seeing if we can learn how to start on time. I don't think that's going to happen. It's been about 4 or 5 years that hasn't happened. And seeing if we can not lose miscellaneous co-hosts. That's just my thinking. I'm still new at this. When I
seems reasonable.
Yeah, it's something to attempt. So how are you gentlemen doing, each of you?
Pretty good.
Isandring, how you been? Aside from being muted for an entire show.
Hey, it ended up working out. Everything was good. I still got my paycheck.
Yeah, those are really easy to send. I make sure I always send those to you, Titan, all the mods, and to Lance at the same time every single month. I don't think I've ever failed to send out exactly what you've been promised. So. Yep.
You were late that one time, but I completely, totally understood. You were right on top of it, man. I'm so sorry. And you got the check in the mail that day.
Yep, exactly. So, all right. So we got this new thing so Greg Terry, and I put a link to his video down in the description. And the reason I did was because he did a very good video on North Korea getting involved in Russia and their invasion of Ukraine. And there was a lot of people in the live chat who were very upset and terrified about this. I will admit, for me, I'm sitting there looking at it. I'm not as worried about North Korea. I'm worried about what happens if China decides to get involved too, for any number of reasons that they may. Iran could get involved, but I'm not as worried about that. And it turns out we've got an expert who wasn't able to show up, so we had Commander instead. And oh, come on.
It was a good one. It was a good one.
Okay, so we know, and the other thing is, of course, I think it's estimated right now 13 defections. So the North Koreans have New York Times reported that they believe it's 13 defections from the front line. The North Koreans are just like, no, going out into the wilds. It's just hilarious because it's like they go out of North Korea. They sit there and they're like, okay, I can sit here and fight Ukrainians, which is probably a really stupid thing to do given the kill ratio. Or I could just turn around and run away and take my chances in the woods or wherever it is they're going. And they're all like, yeah. So I don't know, Lance, what can you tell us about it?
We know that there have been North Koreans in the area because some have been captured or corpses been found that were clearly North Koreans for about 2 weeks now, but never in significant numbers. But now it's become evident that there are probably in the vicinity of 10 to 12,000 North Koreans that are either there or going to be coming. According to Greg, and I don't know where Greg got his info, but he said that there was 3 to 4 engineering brigades and 2 to 3 artillery brigades. Now, I think it's important to note which two types of forces they're sending: engineering and artillery. Artillery, because they've lost so much of their own artillery. They need more of it in the lines. And training to operate artillery as opposed to training for basic infantry is a lot more time consuming and complicated. So it's a more difficult prospect for the Russians to replace their lost artillery personnel. So being able to bring in North Korean mercenaries is a good deal for them. The other one is the engineers. And it depends on what flavor of engineers. Combat engineers would be ones that would be helping to break through fortified lines. The Ukrainians are dug in somewhere, and they would bring up explosives and such to be able to deal with that. Clearly has some land speeds. Construction engineers, believe it or not, are probably almost as important because we're coming into that winter season when they need to have stuff that can shelter their personnel from the winter cold, because it does get cold there. So I could see them being brought in to improve the Russian defense lines, to provide better shelter, more insulation for the personnel, also to create concealment for Russian supply dumps, because we know that the Ukrainians have been enjoying some success in using their own drones to hit Russian supply dumps, which have been causing difficulties for the Russians on the front. So that might be something else that construction engineers needs.
All right. Well, let me, before we continue, Blonde Bombsheller gifted out 5 in-time memberships. So thank you so much for that. We really appreciate that. Your support is, as always, really very much appreciated. So we thank you for that. So while we have a co-host from another show, it's still an in-time show, but he's still is going to be late as ever. Isandring, do you have any questions? I have a couple I was going to ask. I don't know how much you know about North Korea's involvement in the Russian war, but it is increasing. It looks like it's significantly increasing. So, any thoughts?
What I don't understand is North Korea isn't exactly swimming in population to draw military folks from, so their military doesn't have a lot to resupply with, and yet they're going to send them halfway around the world, a quarter way around the world, to fight somewhere else. I don't quite
Well, if you
understand
look
that
at
one.
it, I think if you look at it from the perspective of the chances South Korea and or the U.S. attacking North Korea are slim. Regardless of what their propaganda says, they know that they're not likely targets of an unannounced surprise attack. So they can free up some of their troops and understand that, for example, I said 3 to 4 engineering brigades, they have 20 in their army. So they're only sending a small portion. Same thing with the artillery. They had something like 40 or 50 artillery brigades. So they're doing something, and what are they getting in return? Probably Russian gas and oil. And since they're a country that has so little access to consumer type goods, maybe some of those as well. But the gas and oil would be important because it's part of the industrial needs to run their country. And they pay out the nose to have that stuff smuggled into them. So this is a keen way for them to get that. And remember, North Korea is a very closed society to the extent that if these guys who are sent to Ukraine to fight are all killed, all 10,000 of them, nobody back home is going to know, because they won't advise the families that these people were killed. And if anybody talks about it, they'll be arrested and sent to the prisons. It's easy for them to do it. And if you think the Russians are callous about how they treat their men with these meat assaults, well, welcome to North Korea. You don't even count as meat.
So Lauren asks, quote, "To me, it might be that North Korea no longer has to feed and supply any troops they send somewhere else. It might be a plus logistically." And that was sort of an argument I had made to you about maybe China, which has a huge surplus of men that they are stuck with.
We know from defectors who come from North Korea that their troops don't do a whole lot of training, and in fact, they're often sent to go work in the fields growing crops. So, it's not going to alleviate the supply situation for them that much. Arguably, it might complicate it, because there are 10,000 guys who'd be working in the fields who aren't working in the fields now. But, I mean, I'm sure it does alleviate some of the stress, because we're presumably having those guys fed by the Russians.
And what if they send, say, their military? Is that going to be an issue? Not their military. They're already sending their military, Nick. Their Air Force. What if they send their Air Force?
Yeah, well, let's put it this way. The North Koreans still operate MiG-17s and MiG-19s, which were planes which were already obsolescent in the Vietnam War. So you can get a guess of how useful, in the air quotes, those would be at the front. Now, that's not to say the North Koreans don't have some modern airplanes, but they're very few because they're expensive. They're difficult and expensive to operate and maintain. So they have some MiG-29s, for example. I think they have like 30 of them. It's unlikely they're going to want to send those to go fight at the front, because they want those to be able to react to anything the South Koreans do. And right now, we know one of the tensions that's going on between the North and South Koreans is that citizen groups in South Korea are launching balloons with anti-regime messages to drift across the DMZ and into North Korea. And the North Koreans are totally incensed by this because effectively you're, insulting the God King. And make no mistake about it, the Kim family, all, the grandfather, the father, and now the son, all of them are treated essentially as deities with divine powers. Like they can control the weather according to the way it's put out by the propaganda ministry. That's the kind of nonsense that goes on.
And the grandfather is still the head of the state, I think Kim Jong-un eventually changed that. Yeah,
Grandpa and Dad are both deceased.
Yeah, but technically still the head of the state, if I recalled. And
yeah, he's kind of a titular figurehead, akin to how many in the U.S. would have viewed George Washington up until perhaps the Civil War, a semi-divine figure in some ways. I mean, I'm exaggerating in Washington's case, but you get the sense of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Isandring, the Titan did point out they may also have nukes. I have another question, but I wanted to check and see if Isandring. Yeah.
We know the North Koreans do have nuclear weapons. The problem is we don't know whether they have delivery systems. They have been working on trying to develop a missile that was reliable enough to carry a nuclear warhead. I'm not sure that they have completed that testing to their satisfaction. And the weapons they've designed are large, and I'm not sure they have aircraft that can carry the things. So it's really a question of, what truck do you put the nuclear weapon in the back of and drive to the front with?
And they're fission weapons.
Yeah, these are weapons which are not too much more advanced than the little boy and
original Hiroshima. They're not going to be the ones that are 10 or 100 times stronger than that.
Yeah, they're fairly small. But they're still nuclear weapons, so they're definitely dangerous.
So what does Putin get out of this?
I think the key thing that Putin gets out of this is that it means he doesn't have to start mobilizing from the ethnic Russian core of the empire. And they have been very careful to avoid doing that, to not have unrest being generated in the country. So a lot of the conscripts are coming from outlying areas, ethnic tribes that live in the Far East, that kind of thing. And even when they are bringing Russians to the front, they're either contract volunteers or they're, like we used to do back in the 50s, people who get arrested and, well, you can go to prison for 20 years or you can serve a term in the U.S. Marines. And they're doing a lot of that as well. So he's really, being Putin, is worried about having to do a general mobilization where that element of the Russian population gets directly impacted by the fighting.
And that
if you ever see, I was going to say, if you see any of the man in the street interviews that you can find on some of these YouTube channels, the average Russian in Moscow, Leningrad, Moscow, Orel, the key core Russian cities, doesn't really seem to be at all affected by, or even in some cases aware of the fact that there's a war on. to them, it's a, kind of out there, and it's maybe a police action trying to arrest Ukrainian fascists or something. It is. They don't have a good grasp on what the reality of the situation is.
So, I had said this earlier, and I was expecting, like a noob, that we were going to see a flurry of action in the next, 3 or 4 weeks. That we were going to see loads of, like, the U.S. is going to have to shape a response to North Korea getting involved. Are we going to sit there and say, okay, the limitations are off of Ukraine? They can strike deep as they want and we're not doing any of that. And the reason is really obvious. There's an election coming up, and nobody wants to. It's like everybody is just frozen. Nobody wants to move.
Yeah. So Biden and Harris don't want to have any big move. Even a large aid package would kind of impact their chances, because people say, well, that's money should be spent on disaster relief for the hurricanes in Florida. So they're being very reticent about taking action and stuff like that. And Trump has already made very clear that he's going to cut off any assistance to Ukraine if he gets it. So everything is waiting with that expectant hush of, the impending storm of what will happen after the U.S. elections.
There's been a sense that Biden may make some demands on Israel as soon as the election's over, and take a harder stance on Israel now that he's going to be out of a term, and Kamala can do what she wants with it, but she doesn't have to take the blame for his harder position. Do you think he's going to do that, or do you think, let's assume she wins? Do you think he's going to do that, or is it going to be? There's been some talk that maybe now that they've killed the leader of Hamas, that this is the starting of the ending of the war, which of course hasn't ended in quite some time. But
yeah, it's hard to say, because there's pressure from the progressive side of the Democratic Party to do something dramatic, drastic, to curb Israeli excesses, their attacks on Hezbollah and Hamas. And at the same time, from the other side of the party, the more centrist Democrats don't really want to do that, because they see Hamas and Hezbollah as terrorist organizations who rightly should be bombed into submission, and the fact that the Palestinian people are supporting them makes them just as guilty as the terrorists themselves. So it's this really weird dynamic with American understanding of what's going on there. And whichever way Biden/Harris goes on the issue, you're going to piss off the other side of your own party. You don't want to do that. So after the election, maybe, I don't know. Honestly, the U.S.'s involvement in the Middle East after the Camp David Accords has kind of been sort of a hands-off approach. If it's your problem, you guys solve it. We tried to give you the foundation to build on, and obviously no one over there wants it. So go ahead and kill yourselves. We don't give a damn anymore.
Isandring, any thoughts?
My head is a vacuous place at the moment, and I'm like going, See, I still have all these questions stuck in my head that I was supposed to ask a particular person, and so I'm still trying to get those flushed out. And
wouldn't it have been nice? It probably would have helped if you had been given an opportunity to ask said person. And I remembered one or two of the questions, but it was after the interview. I was in bed. I was just like, I suddenly got up. I was like, "Oh my God!" There was like two other questions that we were supposed to ask, and they were in Isandring's court, and I was like, "Oh." I mean, it's not the worst. What?
It was work. Well, I mean, the interview itself was working really great, and then it was like, because in all fairness, you actually did send me a little message going, "Do you want to take these questions or should I?" And I'm like, everything seems to be rolling, and if you just suddenly throw me in there, having not introduced me, not having said a word through this whole thing, and suddenly the last third or quarter of the thing, you're like, and I think Isandring has some questions. You want to go? It'd be kind of a little jarring. So, we came to the decision that it would probably be best just for you to finish everything out, and everything would run smoothly. It looked more professional, and then we could complain about it today.
And then exactly. We're just going to go on air. We'll be professional in time, and then we'll come on to downtime and just be like, so a certain somebody may have forgotten he had a co-host and didn't introduce him, and then didn't like, "Oh, do you want to talk? Oh, I'm here now, Nick. Huh? You're willing to spend 30 seconds to text message me."
And then you like, "All right, come on in. We're gonna have you in. We're gonna talk about some of these things." And then I'm like, "Okay, but I don't really have questions for Lance." And then you're like, well, your thoughts on this? I hope there's a somewhat soon resolution for everyone involved in this that comes out great, where everybody kind of wins and is happy with it. I don't know what's going on over there. It doesn't seem to be going very well, though. It really does not seem to be going very well. And that was one of the things, since we do kind of like closing final thoughts, and since some of my questions were going to sound very antagonistic towards Ukraine, I figured that I would end the final thoughts with kind of my opinion on, what the U.S. should have been doing in Ukraine from the get-go, which was, I think the U.S. should have stand up and said, no, we have agreements that we've given our word, made promises to Ukraine. If they to give us something we wanted, which was to give up nuclear weapons, we would ensure their safety against invasion, specifically from Russia. And so the moment
and why the hell aren't we doing anything?
Yeah, and the moment Russia did that, like they, maybe you can make some arguments about. I just forgot the name of the peninsula. Crimea. Maybe you could make some arguments about that. Maybe we made some mistakes. I don't know. But the instant they started rolling those things and we went live and it was like, yeah, they're sending columns of troops in. The United States should have mobilized all of their forces in Germany and everywhere that they had in there. And they should have went and wiped them out. They should have stood there and then broadly and loudly across all of the world announced, we made promises to Ukraine to defend them against EU. We live up to our promises, and then dare Russia to step another foot inside of Ukraine. And watch as we wipe them out. That's what should have happened. And of course, now that we haven't done that, we've escalated everything to where now, Putin's making loud noises about the possibility of using tactical nuclear weapons should, a NATO force get directly involved. And there's all this wishy-washiness over it. And it's like, I'm kind of sick of the nation that, or I'm really sick that I'm not seeing the nation that used to stand up and said, no, this is right, this is just, and then dared the rest of the world to cross us. And it's sad. So that's my kind of rant about that.
Yeah, I think if we had done something even approaching that, not even going all in, but partially in, saying a no-fly zone, I think that would have been sufficient to have put Putin in a box. I think the oligarchs would have said, this is too scary, too dangerous. Goodbye, Vladimir.
We've been using a strategy of incrementalism. As you've mentioned before, to sort of arm them more and more. And we had talked with
But Nick, it works so well in Vietnam.
I was just about to say that, and look at where it's gotten us. It's like, damn it! It's like I'm so sick. We've done this so many different places and so many different times, and not just in wars either. It seems like federal policy has kind of ended up coming down on this theory as well, and they're splitting the baby in the middle of the bathwater, and it's getting messy as hell, where we end up with the worst sides of everything. It's like, commit and follow an actual path, and there's probably some downsides to that path, but at least we're not taking on the downsides of both of the paths together, because you couldn't choose one.
Yeah.
Well, and it looks to me like Putin's actually also engaged in a similar incrementalism, but in his case, it seems to be working because, first he took Crimea, now he's going to try to take Ukraine. And because they're interested, they are willing to think generationally. If he's trying to set up eventually getting back all of the Soviet satellite states, we've seen that work to a point before. So it seems like he's using actually kind of a similar strategy, and it's working. We're sitting back going, well, they took Crimea, but, and now it's like, well, they're taking Ukraine, but we're meeting his incrementalism with our own incrementalism, and it looks like he's getting the better deal in that. So, yeah.
I was going to say, and I think all of Europe, maybe not all, most of Europe, are basically looking to us to set the tone, to take the ball and run with it, as opposed to making decisions on what they think is best for themselves. They'll follow our lead. I think some of the countries who are more threatened, the Baltic republics, Finland perhaps, Poland definitely, countries like that, they might be a little more willing to do stuff unilaterally. But French, Spanish, Italians, I think they're going, we're not going to get involved unless the U.S. is going in, and then we'll consider it. And this is a good segue for something that Nat asked earlier on the stream about NATO.
That troublemaker. Listen, if you want to answer Annette's question, she's a troublemaker. I've seen her on the shills. She's just okay. No, if you want to answer her question, go ahead.
I think it's an important question at this juncture.
Please.
And it's about Article 5. I think a lot of people don't fully understand or appreciate what Article 5 of the NATO Charter says. Everybody thinks it says if one member is attacked, everybody else goes to war against the attacker. It doesn't say that. It says if one member is attacked, other member states will do as they feel necessary to support that attacked member. So it leaves the door open to saying, we're just going to send you aid, whether that's cash or old equipment or ammunition or what have you. It doesn't mean they're committing their forces to the fight. And if you extrapolate from that a bit, one could say that in some way of looking at it, NATO has already invoked Article 5 with regards to supporting Ukraine. Because look at the amount of material and monetary aid that has been sent by NATO to Ukraine. So the question that really boils down to is, when we talk about we should invoke Article 5 to come to Ukraine's aid, do you mean we should intervene with our military forces as opposed to just sending aid? And I think that's an interesting question, which, if put to a vote in the United States, would likely not receive the answer a lot of people think that it would receive.
Oh, but okay, but then why not just use the Budapest Accords? I mean, shouldn't that?
Oh, I am. That's bilateral as opposed to a collective security arrangement. And I agree with what Isandring said. I think the moment the Russians crossed the border, we should have mobilized and start sending forces to support Ukraine.
I don't even think we'd have.
I think that would have sent a clear and unmistakable message.
Yeah, here's the whole thing. I'm like, okay, we have strike forces all over the globe.
Yeah.
It's like we could have been there within hours of the first columns crossing that border with our Air Force, and we could have very easily obliterated everything that had come into Ukraine with just a few planes. And then said, then dared Russia to do anything else and said, no, we have made agreements. We're here. And the weird thing about this whole thing, and what makes me so frustrated, and why I keep saying we're splitting the baby and getting the messy ends on both sides and having the negative consequences of both courses of action, is some of the biggest complaints about Ukraine, aside from why are we helping a corrupt country that was corrupt then is still corrupt now. Well, I guess we can argue about that. We made agreements, we made promises because we wanted something. We wanted them to give up the nuclear weapons.
Yeah, there's no corruption in, say, Italy.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
the U.S.
Or the U.S.
I'm like, they're everybody who's opposed to it. I've heard all the same kinds of things. It's like, why are we sending all of our money that I agree we don't actually have to be sending to them? We're just making this money up and sending it to them. We're sending them all of this equipment. We're doing all this stuff, and it's like, why aren't we helping our own Americans here in town? It's like, or here in our own country. Then I'm like, this course of action, if they'd have just stood up, grown a pair, and said, no, we agreed. This is an agreement. We don't go back on our word. One, it would give more integrity to the United States, especially in foreign diplomacy, and two, it would have been a hell of a lot cheaper, because I don't think that anybody would have dared cross that damn border after a few bombers went by and just wiped out the entire columns. With just a couple planes just flew by and suddenly they're all gone, and then very forcefully said no.
No, I won't say anything about how it would be a lot more problematic and difficult, but yeah, I get what you're saying, and I agree. I don't think it would have been an easy thing to do.
I think we've all seen this.
And that's why we didn't do it, because there were so many of what ifs, and at some point I'm like, at some point you have to let your no be no, and say we made agreements, we did this, and you cannot win this fight. And just literally stand up and say it is not possible, Russia, for you to win this fight. The only thing you could possibly do is make everybody lose. And there's a little bit of question as to whether you could actually successfully do that. But that's the whole reason that we have this kind of hesitancy about it. And it's like I don't know, my whole thing, my whole impression. I've tried boning up on history of the region, getting into the mindset. I have a really hard time wrapping my head around the mindset of Eastern European and Russian history and current political leanings. It's like everything that I've taken in over the last few years about this, my gut tells me, had the United States literally very forcefully stood up and said, no, you will not do this. We have agreements with Ukraine to protect them specifically from you. We're going to honor that. And, all those troops you just sent across the border to invade Ukraine are now dead, gone. Your equipment's destroyed, and we will kill anything that crosses that border again. I think that Russia would have backed down, that they would not have wanted to pick that war because he loses. It doesn't make any sense to me that he would literally throw it all away to lose absolutely everything, because the United States could do that to him. just the United States. We don't even need our partners. And I still think it would have been a hell of a lot cheaper than what we've done so far. And it sure as hell would have saved a lot more lives. And the only thing that Putin could have done in response was launch nuclear weapons at us. And it's like, I don't know. I can't see, even with all I've read, I have trouble with the mindset of the region, but I just can't see him saying, that's it, I'm ending the world, because that gets him nothing either, because he knows if he tries to launch at him, we're going straight after him personally. So I don't get it.
I think he'd be willing to, but I think as Lance pointed out, the oligarchs would get rid of him first, because they wouldn't. They want to keep their money. They may be psychopathic and or sociopathic, but they're not.
And I would argue that that's one of the reasons the war hasn't already ended, is because Putin is in a situation where he's gone all in. Doesn't have anything else he can bet at this table. And he has to keep pretending, bluffing he holds the right cards to win. He may actually have the right cards. We don't know. But the key is that once he started the thing, he had to come out of it victorious, because to back out, to admit failure, is tantamount to suicide for him.
Yep.
I mean, all you have to do is look at the situation with Khrushchev and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Within a year of that ending, and arguably the winners of that little confrontation were the Russians, because they got exactly what they wanted to begin with, was to get the missiles out of Turkey and Italy, which happened. But nonetheless, the Politburo decided, no, Khrushchev, you embarrassed us. That was enough to remove him and make him go away. And the current situation in the Kremlin is pretty much the same, if not more brutal.
Well,
had there been had a certain host of In Time not forgotten about me, those were it would have been, this would have been an even weirder juxtaposition, because my entire portion of the questioning was covering all of the reasons that people have for saying we should not be helping Ukraine, we shouldn't have gotten involved, we should be pulling out, we should be telling them you're on your own. And there's several different lines of attack that are coming from those people, and so I was kind of like lining up all of the reasons why we shouldn't be helping Ukraine, or shouldn't be involved, shouldn't be sending them money, etc. So it would have been really kind of that was why at the end I actually had planned out I was going to give on our final thoughts my actual opinion, because I would have just spent 15-20 minutes going, why in the hell should we be doing this, and giving every argument against it to let Greg to go through it all. But so I couldn't give my opinion then, because I actually kind of feel pretty forcefully about the fact that we made agreements to get something we wanted. I say we, the collective. The United States made agreements to get something the United States wanted, and then just casually shrugged it all off and said, well, we got what we wanted, so we don't really want to get our fingers potentially sticky in this morass of potential, so we're just going to brush it off. And it irritates me, because it's like the United States is supposed to be a country of principle, and it should be a country that keeps its word, and it's been failing me quite often since I've started looking more and more into things and going, wow, the United States on the world stage really isn't all that great of an actor, and it's just got a really, really big stick.
What's to me interesting is that in a lot of ways, Putin's in a situation akin to this one that Netanyahu was in. He needs to keep the chaos, the war going to remain in power. Because once and if it ends, all of your bets catch up with you. And, you can go back historically and look. We're kind of the same situation. Napoleon is a perfect case in point. He had to keep going to war to have news posted of glorious victories because there was so much opposition to the political reforms he was putting in place at home. So he had to cover it up with flyers about, oh, look, we just won at Marengo. And I think that's a common failing, weakness of authoritarian regimes, is that once you stick your finger into the dike, taking it out of the dike, it's unacceptable consequences. You have to keep pushing the finger in further and further.
I like that analogy. There was another analogy for something that we've been talking about earlier. I find that the drivers that are amongst the most dangerous on the road are the ones who are too polite, the ones who yield when they shouldn't. It's like if you come to a four-way intersection and there's a driver who's like, no, I'm going to yield, and then they realize that nobody's going because it's really your turn, and then they start to go, and then they cause an accident because they almost invited it by their own inaction and their own hesitancy, and just everybody else was just like, what the hell's going on? So it feels a bit like that's what the U.S. did when this started, which was essentially inviting it by not following through on our agreements. And the problem is, I think...
You're saying you don't like my driving.
I guess your wife's been telling you about, okay, I mean, I did complain, yeah, but, I look, I mean, you got a bum leg, so I get it. And, the sidewalk is probably, the middle of the street is the safest place to walk when you're driving, is what I said technically. And if people want to stay safe, they should get off the sidewalk. That's what I said. But you weren't... Listen, I did the polite thing and said it to you, said it to your wife behind your back. Okay, I didn't mean to air this. This is all on you.
I'm too nice to the right.
Exactly. So, I really believe, because the interesting thing about Iran, and we've had on Iranian dissidents, we've talked to a number of people in Iran, and it seems that for the most part, most of the people don't hate the United States, which is kind of amazing considering we overthrew the democratically elected government there. Having said all that, they like our products. They like American culture, and it seems to me that the old guard is realizing that they're going to have to make some concessions if they don't want to have a revolution, which they've been kind of flirting with for a while. So the nuclear deal they were following through with, to the best of my understanding, and they were doing what they were supposed to be doing. Trump just decided, well, I can get a better deal, and which obviously he A, could not, and B, we had already negotiated it, and they were, so the way we didn't get out of the deal. What we did was we lied, said that they were breaking the rules, and then decertified it. But it was a lie. We got out of that, and I'm sitting there going, at some point nobody's going to be making any deals with us, and we really have been profiting from a lot of deals. I think we would have profited from keeping that deal, and I think Iran really can. There was a time when Iran was not. We did a whole show on it. I mean, in the 70s in Iran, women were wearing two-piece bathing suits. I mean, it was a very different time. So I think Isandring's, I hate to say this, they still can't clip on this, can they? Even though it's downtime, yeah, they can't clip this. So I think Isandring's got a point. So. Again, for those of you who are new, Isandring's a conservative. I'm a liberal. I think we get along very well because we both listen to each other's points of views. But he does often get the position of foil, and isn't he lucky? We're going to make Isandring ask all the really hard questions. And we had talked to Greg before the interview, and we're like, okay, Isandring's going to ask you about the corruption. And he's going to point out where we know there's still corruption. But we let Greg know ahead of time, so he'd be ready for the question. Because... we already actually knew the answer, and We don't usually want to humiliate. If we humiliate anyone, it's usually the co-hosts that we look to humiliate, like Isandring and Commander Macmillan. There, we don't like to humiliate the guests unless we have no choice.
It's not like we're like trying to get the I gotcha. It's like I actually want a well thought out, informed response to that. I'm not trying to trap people into a gotcha moment because you can't think of the answer right off the top of your head. So anytime I have difficult questions where I'm like, yeah, I kind of want answers to this because these are the arguments being made and I want you to get your response to this, but I want a well-reasoned and thought-out response to it. I don't want to spur the moment, you're trying to trap me or you're attacking me response. So yeah, we quite often will let them know ahead of time, hey, these are the kinds of questions I'm going to be answered. Please think about a nice response or a good response for them.
I'm not going to get into the hardest one, but the hardest one was we were doing a genuinely hostile interview where, in our view, the person we were interviewing was going to lie to us and probably lie to us throughout the entire show. And we made sure they had every single question in advance. Like, these are the questions we're going to ask. We're going to accuse you of lying. We're going to accuse you of theft. We're going to accuse you of a whole bunch of stuff. Here are the questions so that you can't come back later and say, like, oh, yeah, no, I'll be honest. Like, okay. And by the way, we do reserve the right on a follow-up if you try to bring out new information. But it actually, after the interview, we did all that. And they're like, oh, I'll come back anytime. I was like, okay, great. Haven't done that show since. At any rate, yeah, that's a good observation. But as Isandring, yeah, you do a good job of coming up with really good questions that I don't think of anyway. So when the host, and I've asked Titan to look into who was hosting that particular show, there was obviously a breakdown in communication for some reason. You weren't introduced and brought on. We will find the person responsible and probably not do anything to them. But
while we're still at least peripherally on Ukraine, I'd also like to address Zelensky's supposed victory plan.
Yes.
For those who don't know, and it's important to understand, this is not a peace plan. This is a victory plan. Everything hinges on step one of the peace plan, which is Ukraine gets NATO membership by the end of 2025. And I don't think that anyone has any sense that that is likely to happen. For one thing, it is kind of a violation of the NATO charter, which you can't join or become a member if you are currently actively in a war.
And let me interrupt real quick. I don't think that's in the charter. I just think that that's sort of an unspoken understanding. But if I'm correct, that's not actually in the charter.
Okay, I thought it was.
Okay, I'll look it up. Okay, never mind. Apologies. Please continue.
No, it doesn't matter. Either way, even if that isn't the case, which is what I was going to say, you still have to get a membership vote passed both Erdogan and Orlan, that's Turkey and Hungary, who have made very evident that they're not in favor of anything. So that becomes a problem. And then unless that step, that number one step, is brought to fruition, pretty much all the other steps can't happen. So it's really unfortunate that that was done that way. I know that he made visits to a number of different heads of state, both throughout the EU and to the US, where he talked about this, and they kept everything under wraps. So everybody knew that he was considering this, and then he made a speech to their parliament, the Rada, where he announced this plan. And almost immediately, he started getting negatory responses from some of the predictably not going to favor this. It's unfortunate, and I like to think this is actually not a specific request, but in some ways a veiled warning that if these things don't happen, Ukraine is not going to be able to win the war. They will have to surrender significant portions of territory, give up certain rights, etc. And one of the preconditions for an armistice may be you can't join NATO, whatever. And he's trying to let everybody know, hey, this is what I'm trying to get at. You need to take action now, because within a year you're likely not going to be able to take action.
So I saw in the live chat it was pointed out, and I just checked because I certainly didn't know myself, that in the peace plan he's asking for an invitation, not specifically that he join. Why that distinction is important, I don't know, but the fact that people in the live chat knew that distinction and that distinction is in fact correct suggests to me that there is something important about that distinction.
It's an important distinction. The other thing is, NATO doesn't extend invitations. Non-members apply to join the alliance. And that's kind of important as a distinction in this. So he's kind of saying that, I want to get in, and you need to take action soon, because it may not be something we can do if this continues the way it's going.
AF Kaplan, I just checked NATO's charter. One of the conditions is for the candidate states members must settle international disputes peacefully. So that would indicate I was in error and Commander was correct. Big shock. But I'll look into it.
I know everything. I know everything, and what I don't know, I make up.
First of all, I know almost everything, and what I don't know, I got from you. I'm like, I'm going to do a show. I've been asked to go do this show. I'm doing the shills. Could you just tell me everything that you know about this? So half an hour later, I come on, I sound like an expert. They're like, Nick, you know everything. I was like, yeah, I have Commander's phone number. That's about it. That's all I need to know. When Commander and I disagree, you can basically, 7 out of 10. He'll be right, I'll be wrong on occasion. On occasion, I get lucky, but usually. Oh, dear Lord. All right, so, so that means they would not ostensibly be able to join. I'll have to look that up, because I remember looking that up and finding out specifically, so I'll look up again, and I'm sure I'll find out that I'm wrong, and my memory is all hazy and all that other. But thank you for looking that up and dropping that in the live chat. I appreciate it. And as a reference to we are proudly an educational channel. Gotchas aren't important, and in general, with interviews, if we're going to be asking difficult questions, which we like to do, we let the other people know so they can be as prepared as possible, and we will follow up. I mean, if they dodge it, we'll follow up. We let them know that too. We're like, look, the reason we're letting you know that we're going to ask this question is because if you don't have an answer, we're going to follow up. My
eyesight isn't as good as it used to be, but one of your people in the chat stream here, something 23, says read Article 10. I just did. You are correct. NATO has to extend a unanimous invitation to join.
Well, and we will now post hoc go back and edit the show and say that I had thought Commander was wrong, so I just got one in 3 out of 10 times I get to be right. All right, so
I was going to go research all of that so that I could be a recognized expert when we bring topics like this up, and you'll make a statement. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's this, and I can be like, definitively, you're correct. It is that, or you're just wrong. That's not what it is. Unfortunately, they don't do things like put the NATO treaty on audio. So.
Oh dear Lord! It's Well, and it's almost like that time that guy invited you to a gun debate, and he did like all this research and had all these slides, and because you were like actually in a truck, you couldn't actually have like any records or anything like that. That was a dick move, whoever did that. Anyways, all that notwithstanding, shit, now I've had a squirrel moment, and oh yes, okay.
Okay, I can't pull a lot of things out of my memory, so.
I was impressed. Well, you did say that, like, I think you multiply by 10 the number of people who die on our freeways, but other than that, everything was spot on. That's my recall from
the
watching
same thing,
this.
and you and I were in agreement.
Shit, you do remember?
Like, I don't. And then we tried going back and finding. It's like, where did we get this number? Because I showed it to you. I sent you a copy.
Well, you did, and I looked at it, but I was like,
I was a bit shocked too. Yeah, because I did the search for it, and it came up, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm sure that this is an official government website. I sent it to you because I didn't think it was that high, and we both looked at it, and we both were like, wow, that's actually kind of shocking. And then turns out we were completely wrong. I don't know where in the hell I got that thing from. Must have been AI or something. Fuck, I don't know where it came from.
This is check your sources. Well, my source was you. I was just like, yeah. Let's not do that again. Okay, so we're gonna start wrapping up in a few minutes. But I was thinking, is there any chance, given let's assume best case scenario in the war, for at least the midterm, it gets peaceful enough that one could arguably give them an invitation, send that out. Is there any way to get past Turkey? Because it has to be unanimous. Everybody has to agree. Is there anything that we could give Turkey, or any way to get past Turkey?
Turkey always has something it wants. And they have shown repeatedly that they are, for lack of a better word, bribable. So I don't know what it would be in this instant, but you could probably get there to want to buy off on something if you gave him whatever it is he's looking for. I think the stumbling block becomes Orban in Hungary.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's more of a old school ideologue, and he's far less susceptible to that kind of deal making.
Do you think there's any hope of getting past Hungary then, or do you think that that's ultimately going to be a defeater?
The question is whether the Hungarians can move Orban out of the way. And he's started making modifications to their constitution and such that are making it increasingly difficult for him to be removed from office. So technically, he's not, an authoritarian regime, but it's pretty damn close.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, any final thoughts before we a little more serious than Downtime usually is, but a lot going on. So we've been having pretty soon we'll just start doing these regular shows. I don't know. Any final thoughts, Isandring, aside from getting sandbagged on both the gun debate and on we've got to find the producer. This is all the producer's fault. So we'll figure out how and why. You're not getting your due credit. Still getting your paycheck, but you're not getting your due credit.
We'll take off on our sailing ship, our tall ship, and we'll just, when we find them, we'll keel haul them with spaghetti noodles.
Wow, that doesn't sound pleasant. I'm gonna make a note to remove my name from the production credits on this thing. Just hold on 1 second. Okay, there we go. All right.
No, I got to say my
Yeah.
final thoughts for that I wanted, that I had been saving up and carefully thought out. I should have written them down, but I was driving, so.
Well, you said it as well as I remember it, because you and I had that discussion before the show, and that was what you wanted to say. So I'm glad you got a chance to say it, because I think it's important, and I think again, especially where it looks like now we are working on the Iran agreement again. It seems to me that when we act with integrity, it usually works out for the best. It's not always, and it fails enough that naysayers can sit there and say, you see, you should take advantage of the system. But the people who take advantage, I mean, I wouldn't want to live in Russia for anything. I wouldn't want to live in North Korea. I wouldn't want to live in any of these places. But for the strong man, it's, what was it? Bush said, if you're the strong man, then it's great for you. And so the people who can take advantage of the system and then build it their own way, there's no incentive for them to do the right thing. And there's no incentive.
Mel Brooks said it perfectly. It's good to be king.
Yep. So I think you're right that if the more we can keep our word, and the more this probably could have, hindsight's 2020, but yeah, we were there live, and we were there live. Actually, I think it was the three of us were covering it live when we caught the 7-mile long column rolling from Crimea into the rest of Ukraine. So it's been a long road for us. But thank you very much, Commander, for joining us again as always. And we will be back same time next week. Isandring will have another show, and not only will you get a card, but you may actually get audio, which would be really nice if I can get that working. Thank you to the.
You always promise the sky, and we all see the delivery.
I don't even promise the sky. I promise audio, and half the time it's like, "Hello, fly." But yeah. Sometimes we get it. I was going to mute you earlier, but every time, let me just see if the mute Isandring button is working. Hold on a second, because I did do. That was the wrong button.
Oh.
You can hear me, but this shield, yeah. No, I don't mute. My own shield doesn't mute. It's the only shield that doesn't mute.
I'm shield proof.
Oh. Is that Lance has worked? Wow. That worked beautifully. I don't think I want to hear what he was saying. Whoa.
I can hear him. I can hear him. And you can't, but I can hear him. The audience can't hear him either. But he's making an absolutely brilliant point, and I can't believe we haven't done this, because it would literally solve the world's problems. And
really?
We could stop our immigration crisis. We would have our streets cleaned up. Everybody would have a chicken in every pot. Everybody would have their own home.
Care to repeat it?
There would be world peace. I'm not nearly that eloquent.
Well, that I believe.
First true thing I've said all night.
Well done.
All right.
Well done.
On that note, thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Sinister Porpoise, Dunk on You, and Blonde Bombsheller for the gifts and for the super chats. They really do help out. YouTube likes to demonetize us, so I have no idea why. But thank you all for joining us, and we will see you, barring any breaking news. Let's hope not. I think the next 3 weeks, hopefully. Every time I say, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next week.